I'm a coffee nerd, and I want to have to try to have the best quality in the cup. But when you have 5 places like me and a team of, I think we're at the peak time we have 18 to 20 barista, but it's impossible to have 20 world champions.
Welcome to, or welcome back to Coffee with April. My name is Patrick Rolfe, and this is a conversation with some amazing professionals and entrepreneurs in the coffee industry, sharing their perspective and experience. It's about integrity, quality, and the future. For this episode, we sat down with Francois, owner and founder of Café Capital in Brussel, Belgium. We had a very open and honest discussions about the challenges and opportunities that comes with running not just a coffee roastery, but also coffee shops. I think this is an episode that is really relevant for any of you that wants to start your own coffee business or already have it. Enjoy. So I'm sitting in Brussels in Belgium together with Francois that has Café Capital, which is a roastery, coffee shop, and about to be a lot more as well. We spent a few days together here exploring the coffee scene in Belgium. We have had a day out in Gent yesterday, which was really interesting, and I spent some time up in Antwerpen as well. It's been a very good trip, and let's see. You and me, Francois, we met the first time. Was it 2 years ago?
2 years ago, yeah. I remember it. I contact you to have a roasting consultant in my previous roasting space, and every day that I open my roaster and my roasting program, I remember this moment because you draft for me an Excel table with all where I need to log all the information about the roasting, and the first date of this Excel table was the first roast that I do with you.
Yeah, sure. I remember that very well as well. And the Excel table was we talked a lot about in between times when we roasted, and we talked a lot about just logging information as well. And we're going to get back to more about roasting in this conversation later as well. So now it's 2 years later. That's a lot of things have been happening in your company since that time.
Yeah.
So I want us to try to kind of deconstruct and look at that as well, and try to share with all of you that are listening as well the how it is to start a roastery, and also how it is to start coffee shops as well, because that's something you've been doing for a long time as well.
Yeah.
But first of all, we're sitting in a beautiful new roastery space and educational space as well that you opened.
3 months ago.
2 months ago, brand new.
During the summer, 4 months ago. And in fact, the previous space where we were was a little too short. Then we decided to move the place, and now we are really close from the Brussels center. Then it's super easy for me and for my customer to come here, but also the idea is to open an education place or an education training center, what you want, to start with the SCA model for the barista brewing green coffee and perhaps roasting in the future. And this place is divided in fact in three rooms, theoretical rooms and video rooms, the barista training room with 2 machines and all what you need to make an espresso extraction or brewing, and the roastery with in fact a sample roaster, 1 kilo roaster per bat, and a 5 kilo per bat.
Yeah. I'm always very curious when I meet roasters and we talk about their machines, right? So is there a special reason why you started with Probat?
No, it's just in fact, it's just a question of contact, and the Probat provider in Belgium is the same than the Malkoning provider. And
sure, and then it's easy to move on.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. What came first for you? Did you start the coffee shop first or the roastery first?
We start with the coffee shops 10 days or 11 years ago. 10 years or 11 years ago. But the first idea when I opened a coffee shop was a cool place is to drink coffee, but I have no idea about the quality of coffee and what's the specialty coffee, and if the coffee is green beans or black beans on a tree. Then I have absolutely no idea about the coffee, but just the project was to have places with lazy sofa and cool music and café gourmand with a lot of whipped cream and syrup and so on. And after a few years like this, I think it was in 2011 or 12, I made a travel in Australia and with a friend, and I discovered a new kind of market, and I was totally smashed by what I taste and when I see in Melbourne and Sydney, places where you sell only classic basic milk drink and filter coffee with no whipped cream, with no syrup, with no topping, and a huge line of customer. And when I try the coffee, I understand the difference between my commodity coffee, dark roast, and a specialty coffee. And when I come back in Brussels, I decide to follow this trend and start to understand and make a lot of courses to understand the different origin, different kind of beans, and step by step I do so many workshops, and I passed all the SCA modules and the Q grading, and finally I decide to change all the previous projects to another kind of coffee shop.
Yeah. So the foundation of your education, because education in coffee is very interesting, I think. That's something that has developed a lot over the last years as well. But then you've gone through the SCA systems first before starting roasting. Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah. In fact, I follow a first workshop at Belco in France, and the guy said to me, but do you know there is an association named Specialty Coffee Association, and they have so many workshops all around the world, and
yeah.
let's do it.
Amazing. So then you've gone through all the courses, and I mean, how did you go about starting the roastery?
We started the roastery now, I think it's 4 years ago, and but it was the same. I started the roastery after passed all the SCA roastery module, but finally the SCA education system is very important to understand what you need to follow, but the final structure, I think it's when I have your consultants during 3 days, and I understand that the most important in the roasting system is to be regular and consistency and log the maximum information as you can, and understand your roaster. In fact, how your roaster works, and how many times it needs to be hot, how many times it needs to be clean, how many times when you need to open the doors, and in how many seconds the temperature will drop. And I think each roaster has its own life, in fact.
Sure, yeah, definitely. And I think the SCA courses are they're a great foundation, I would say. I mean, it's any kind of education is always a good thing, right? Because you can always learn. But the challenge with them, especially from a roasting perspective, is that they're very general, right? They're not specific.
No.
So it's very, very hard to actually implement them on your own system, on your own machine. And as you say as well, roasting is it's a very individual thing, right? So, I mean, if I go around the world and I roast on different loring machines, right? As I roast on a loring, then all of these are going to behave slightly different depending on where they are, right? We have different gas pressures, with different exhaust tubes, different temperatures, different humidity, and so on, right? So it's very, very hard to generalize any kind of knowledge about roasting.
Yeah.
What was easiest for you, starting a coffee shop or starting a roastery, or were they both? Was that a difficult process?
I think the easiest way is to open a coffee shop. In fact, it's super easy because, in fact, you repeat always the same thing. You need always, in fact, in all the coffee shop, it's always the same grinder. There is 2 brands for the coffee machine, and that's it. You need always the same filter for the water, an osmose or a cartridge. But in fact, it's super easy to open a coffee shop, and it's super easy also to train a team to be a barista, because it's super trendy to be a barista, and the people have an image about the works, and this job is in fact you find super easy people who want to do this job. But the roastery, it's a personal job. You are often alone in front of the machine. Temperature is not very comfortable generally. And then you need to be focused alone in front of finally beans and speak with your machine and your cropster to but you're alone. Then I think it's not very funny for the team to do these jobs, but definitely is the main part of the company.
Sure.
And this job is generally in the hand of a very small or very tiny team, just 1, 2, 3 person who had the secret of the company. And then, I think it's easier to do a coffee bar than a restaurant.
Yeah. I think there is a lot of perhaps misconception is the wrong word, but there's definitely a lot of people starting a roastery that doesn't necessarily know what they're getting themselves into, because as you say, it's a very different job or kind of a day-to-day thing from what most people would say. I mean, it's a pretty heavy, dirty, lonely job to some extent, right? I mean, the majority of the time. And I think it's easy from a kind of a viewer standpoint to only see the positive things, right? You see the roaster that goes to Origin, you see the roaster that travels to like a cool event somewhere, but the reality is that a roaster most of the time stands alone by the machine and lifts really heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Basically, right?
And in fact, you are alone in front of your roaster, but also you are also alone in the after work when you start the cupping. In fact, you need to find the energy, because after to cup 20 cups, for example, you know that you have your own dishes, you need to clean everything,
Sure.
but you are alone, you have, and I prefer to do it also alone, because when we cup in team, in fact, there is so many information. It's interesting to have that kind of information, but finally there is no decision, because two person preferred cup number 2, two other person preferred cup number 5, and finally which one is the best one, nobody knows. And at the end of this session you have no answer. Then I prefer to do it myself, and with my knowledge, my different experience during the last years, and decide. In fact, it's my touch in this coffee shop, and this touch I need to decide if this coffee have my own touch or not. Then
well, I think that's very important, and that's a big part of being an owner, right?
I think it's the same for you. You stay the roaster because you want to decide the April touch. And
sure. I mean, it's important. It's a very challenging aspect of it, right? I mentioned this previously in this podcast as well, and in the episode we did with Tim Venable. We had this a few minutes where we discussed the fact that what's so cool with Tim Venable as a roastery, that he's been actually having a lot of different people roasting, but the coffee is still so continuous, right? I mean, it tastes the same even though we had so many different people actually roasting, and that's because it's him taking responsibility, right? Whereas like Tim Venable has, as a company, has a taste profile, right? And the people that are in that company are supposed to create that taste profile. And I think that's really interesting. And it's something that we at April work a lot on as well, right? Whereas there is a lot of different ways to make coffee that tastes good. I believe that. I don't believe it's one way. I believe there's a lot of different ways. But the important thing for us at April is that April has a taste profile, right? So the staff in April are allowed to have a lot of opinions, which is good, and it's part of progressing, right? But there will always be a path where April coffee is supposed to taste like this. This is what we're going for always, and that won't change with people. But that's a result of a reflection on what kind of coffee I like, right? Which is part of why I would never personally start a coffee shop, because I can imagine that to be very difficult, right? Whereas in the roastery, you as an owner, you're more in control of the taste quality that comes out, because it's a smaller team. It's a more consistent process. But when you open up coffee shops, it gets challenging because you have so many baristas. Had that been frustrating for you? Has that been a difficult process to make sure that the Capital coffee is tasting the way you want to, not just like roasted coffee in a cupping bowl, but also then serving to your guests?
Yeah, then it's also one reason for why I do now the SCA training modules, because it was a challenge. And in fact, the taste is so subjective that you have always discussion with people who about something that nobody had the right answer. In fact, then we need to decide a process to be sure that what I would like to do is what is it in the final cup. Then we start the SCA training center to the barista who want to work behind my coffee machine need to be certified by the minimum intermediate level. And that's why we decide to start also the SCA module in our training center for our team, because I decide that the barista who will be behind my coffee machine need to have the minimum intermediate level for the brewing and the barista. Why? Because there is a general knowledge that a guy need to have to start like a professional, and the minimum is the intermediate level. Also, I decide some guidelines. We can discuss about this decision of guidelines, but I think it's guidelines who will help the barista. In fact, we use only 20 grams basket with 20 grams in, the 20 grams of coffee in, and I would like to have between 40 and 44 grams out. Then ratio 2.2, and the TDS need to be controlled every 1 hour and 30 minutes, and the TDS need to be at 8.75%. Okay, it's a general recipe. For sure, we can adjust the recipe to have a better cup, perhaps. I'm okay with this idea, but we need to switch the maximum. I need to be sure that the barista have the minimum decision in the construction of the recipe. That's why the timing, the extraction time could be adjusted by the barista, but the goal is to have 8.75 TDS and to have 40 to 44 grams out. That if the extraction is between 24 or 28 seconds, I'm ready to speak about this and to taste the different cup. But I don't want to have a barista who decide to put 18 grams in and 40 out in the shop number 1, and in the shop number 2 perhaps a totally other version of this coffee. That's why for this guideline was decided.
You need consistency, right? All coffee shops need consistency. I think it's you always go in and you evaluate a coffee shop mainly based on the worst coffee they make, right? That's usually how it works. So, it doesn't matter if I go in, let's say 5 days in 1 week and I have 4 amazing coffees and I have 1 completely crap coffee, then my perspective of that shop will be mainly based on that really bad coffee I got, right? So I totally understand that you want to standardize it as
and
much
also
as you can.
I'm totally I don't want that the barista work with a pre-programmed touch on the machine, the pre-volume program touch, because I think the barista works is not only to push on a button and to wait 25 seconds and start again another cup. No, the job is to understand and to read the extraction and to see the color of the extraction and to understand that there is something wrong, or the extraction is very consistency. Then if you let your barista with a pre-programmed touch, in fact you have a lazy barista at the end, and step by step it's an automatic barista, and that it's not the job that I want. I want people who understand the coffee, see the people who are able to read the color of the coffee during the extraction. It's for me super important. The people who see immediately the density of the liquid when the liquid drop into the cup. And if you do a job with a pre-programmed touch, finally what you do, you push on the button and you speak with your friend, or you do something other, and you don't see anything about the coffee. Here you need to have your eyes on the chrono and on the scales.
Yeah, sure, and I think it's, there's a lot of discussion these days about baristas, you see this automated, they're like robot arms that are brewing your coffee these days. You see this fully automatic machines coming up as well. And there's more and more of a discussion that we want to have, or a lot of people want to have less baristas, right? Which is mainly a cost thing as well. But I agree with you with the fact that we have most baristas today are staring way too much at the numbers, right? I mean, it's the same when you roast coffee as well, as if we have this reality now that people are roasting a lot more based on curves and lines than actually what is happening now when I'm roasting. And the reality is that even if you have a line, or let's say you reach the right temperatures, right weight when you brew espresso, or right total roasting time, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean the coffee will taste the way you want to, right? Because there's a lot of other variables that goes into it as well. And we need to have a basic understanding for not just the endpoints, right? But also what's happening in between there. Because if I go in, for example, from a roast perspective and I say, so I want a 50% batch size, I want the roast to be 11 minutes, I want the time after crack to be 1 minute and 20 seconds with 3-degree temperature increase after crack, then getting those numbers are relatively easy. That's not an issue. But again, there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? I can do that with a lot of different burner temperatures. I can do that with a lot of different starting temperatures and so on as well. So there's a lot of ways to modify it. So if we only look at the start and the finish and not what's actually going on in between and the actual craft, I think it's really difficult for us. I think to make tasty coffee, and it's the same for a barista in the shop. I remember very well. She's not a barista anymore, but at the first work that I had in coffee at Dan Matteo back in Gothenburg, that was right in. I mean, that was 7-8 years ago. So that was when people started to use scales. Before, people didn't really do that. They didn't really program, right? But we all started to use scales, and we thought it was really cool. But the reality is that the girl or the woman that brewed the best tasting coffee in the company was, she worked in the office, but she was a barista previously. Her name is Lina, and she would come in every once in a while in the coffee shop for fun, and she would never use any scales. Never, right? She would just grind out the coffee. She would always dose perfect, but she would never use scales. She would just be able to see it, right? And then brew the espresso, just looking at the espresso, and stopped whenever she, thought it looked right, and it always tasted the best, always, right? So I think that's really interesting. I mean, we can't lose touch of the proper craft as well.
Yeah, but I'm sure in the future we will have for the roasting the same system like for example the electronic music, that you will have library with all the curve from the famous roaster in the world or the famous coffee shop in the world, with library of curve that you can import in your cropster and roast like Tim Waldebro, or if you want to roast like April, it will be super easy. You import the curve from all of his coffee that he roasted during the year. For example, how to roast this amazing Gachefe 89 from I don't know which roaster, and up you buy a library of curve, and then it's super easy. You follow the line, and you don't understand what you do, but you need just to follow the line with your burner.
And it will still be tasty. Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's. And
it will be the future.
I mean, that's exciting. I mean, it's twofold, right? Because that's also kind of exciting. And I mean, we want tastier coffee. We want innovation. We want progression. I think that's very important, right? So, but I mean, it's always a combination, right? We always need to progress and become better as well, right? I was just over in Brussel now for the World Brewers Championship, and what strikes me the most when competing there is that we're all doing the same thing, right? So the level of progression or innovation is not there, right? No one's really doing anything new. And I think that we see that a lot in coffee at the moment. And I think that people are talking about the new wave in coffee being fully automatic, right? More digitalized, which is true. But the thing is that these machines are just doing the theory that we already have decided, right? So my point is that we need to get better on the theory, right? We need to have a better understanding for what we're doing on a roasting and a brewing perspective. Let's switch gear a tiny bit here. Go back to the roastery. It's a lot to talk about there. What has been the most difficult part of starting a roastery? What has been the biggest challenge?
To understand the different variety of coffee, to know why a Typica beans is not the same than a geisha, and then you need to treat it differently. And this is not super easy for people, because sometimes people use the same curve for everything, and they have no attention about the variety, the origin, the density, the moisture of the beans, and it's a combination of different information about the beans, and then with this information you build the curve. But also often when you are a roaster, if your B2B customer are not especially specialty coffee bars, you have a strange position, because you want to follow a trend that your customer have no idea about which trend is it. For example, very light roast or very acidic coffee, and then you need to adapt your quality to in your mind a less poor quality,
a less tasty coffee.
Yeah, a less tasty coffee to be adapted to the knowledge of your B2B customer. And it's for me it's a strange position when a customer said me, yeah, I would like to have something darker or with a higher bitter taste in the coffee, because all of my customers have a bad feeling with this taste. But I'm sure my job is okay, and the beans are super good for sure when I taste it. But the job of the barista need to be also adapted to this kind of coffee. And generally in classic bar or classic restaurant, they don't follow the minimum guidelines or barista skills, and yeah, the coffee tastes bad because the water is not filtered, or the machine is dirty, or you extract it in 10 seconds. Yeah, but what can I do about this? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a frustration that a lot of roastery owners have, I think, for sure. I mean, because it's so much come to the kind of final, who is brewing this coffee that decides the quality of it. In a lot of, I mean, there's amazing roasters around the world that has amazing specialty coffee shops, and you can still sometimes go in and the coffee would not be very tasty, right? Even if we know that the work they're doing is amazing, but the quality doesn't transfer because the last person in charge is not doing what they're supposed to do, right? So
the quality is not transfer exactly the right sense.
How do you balance that? I'm very curious as. So April, when I started that, the focus was always been and has been until today as well, that we do not roast coffee or source coffee differently depending on clients, right? So we do coffee the way that we believe coffee should be done, which is why April is a tiny roastery as well, because it's hard to grow when you don't do these kind of adaptations to what those kind of clients want. And what's your more from a business model idea? I mean, are you Are you happy to do customized coffee, for example, or do you prefer not to? Or
I buy the coffee that I like, and I roast the coffee that I would like to sell, and I decide for the customer which coffee will receive the next week. In fact, it's very, it's a strong way, perhaps for some customer, but we buy a small quantity of bags, and when this quantity is down, we need to switch to another origin or another variety or another process, perhaps. But I decide which coffee he will have in his own hopper. But for sure, I'm not a crazy guy. Then I know that there is some origin that it's too tricky for that kind of customer. Then I decide to turn between Brazil, Colombia, and Guatemala, Honduras, and for other kind of customer like Fika, we can go to something more specific with where you need to have a precision into the to the extraction. Then, but finally, I decide which coffee I have in my lineup and which coffee you will receive for the next week. The only thing that I don't want to change is the final price for the B2B customer. Then we decide, we spoke about the price before to start the collaboration, and we decide a price, and I follow the quality of the coffee in relation with the final price that
to the price. Yeah.
To the price, yeah. Then the customer knows the final addition, the final bill, but he don't know which coffee he will receive. But I play the game. Then I try to have always the best coffee as possible for that kind of price, and the sweetness or the complexity of the taste, it depending of what kind of customer I have.
Yeah, if we follow down on the kind of green coffee track here, because I know you visited quite a few origins as well.
Mm-hmm.
You've done quite a lot of travels. What's your idea and vision and plan structure behind the green coffee you buy? Do you have a specific idea in mind there?
In fact, I'm very attracted by the small quantity of one lot. Then if the lot have a high quality and a small quantity, it's two things that I'm very interested in. Why? Because I will try to skip the possibility to have the same coffee than another roaster in my country, because finally the diversity of green coffee beans provider is very small. There are perhaps 8 to 10 main actors where everybody buys the beans. Then the chance that you have the same coffee than another one is huge. That's why I will try to select coffee with small quantity of bags available, and this is one thing. Also, if it's possible, I prefer to have contact with farmer or groups of farmer like Nadine. Nadine Rush is, for example, farmer, but she have a selection of different farmer. But
sure,
the selection is from the same area, the same country, or the same province, and that I follow that kind of green beans provider. In fact, step by step, I prefer to work with specialty geographical specialty provider, and not a provider with a huge menu of origin, because
We focus on something a bit more specific, right?
Yeah.
So Nadine, that we referenced, she's actually been on this podcast as well. She has Primavera in Guatemala, and she specializes in probably the best quality Guatemala coffee. We buy from her at April as well. I mean, it's some absolutely amazing coffees, and it's.
And we know that this coffee will be not in the hand of all the roaster.
Exactly. I mean, we do see a lot of green coffee, or a lot of roasted coffee that really is the same from a lot of roasters, and I think that's twofold as well, because to some extent it's kind of interesting because there's an opportunity to taste what other people are doing with a specific coffee. At the same time, it gets to some extent also really boring, and it gets more difficult to find an identity in that, right? So I would prefer a diversity of roasters, right? And April at the moment now is also going down a road where we are definitely start locking in coffees that no one else will be able to have, right? Which is difficult because that also comes with size. It's harder to do that when you're small, I think. So that's very much a process that comes with time, but I think it's important because it comes down to really finding the identity in the roastery, for sure, as well. I think that's very important, even though that's always going to be also reflecting on where you are. I want us to jump ahead a bit and talk about, so you've been through, when I met you 2 years ago, you had almost double the amount of coffee shops as you have today, right? So there's been a switch from how many shops?
From 5 to 2.
From 5 to 2 shops. And I think that's very interesting. We've been talking a lot about that the last 2 days. We've been hanging out as well. And what's so fascinating for me there is that it seems to me that was a decision to focus, right? Because you wanted a higher quality in your core brand, Capital, right? Do you want to walk us through that a bit? How was that process for you? Because that must have been a challenging process as well. Or was it just was it crystal clear and super easy to do?
No, it takes a long time to decide to decrease the quantity of the business, for sure, and it's tricky because you receive each month an amount of money due to the sales, and the months after you divide it by 2 or 3. Then it's super tricky. But the decision was super easy in my mind. Why? Because all of my day were, in fact, the general days was to pass in all the shop to try to manage a tons of problems, and technical problems or personal team problems, personal problems, providers problems, and the rest of the time I was in the roastery to roast tons of beans for these 5 places. Okay, but I have no time to have. In fact, you need to have time to understand what's the quality, what you need to do in the future, what's the next trends, or what the people needs in the future. And this time, I've no time to do this, and I was super frustrated, and I was always angry because each hour there was a bad news about something was not on time at the a barista was not wake up, a provider forgot to come at the right time, the dishes machine is flowing, a lot of things that you are always angry and no time to take to mind about what you need to do. And also, we have 3 brands. We have Café Capital with 3 shops, Café de la Presse and Café du Sablon. And in these 2 other concepts, in fact, yeah, we have 40% of the sales with hot drinks and 60% of the sales with food. And we need to manage a kitchen, a big kitchen with a team of 5 people, sandwiches, salad, soup, and blah blah blah. And it's not my job. In fact, I don't want to do this. I want to do coffees. And in Café Capital, we have around 70 to 75% of the sales is hot drinks. The rest is pastries, and we do these pastries ourselves. Okay, but the main part of the business is what I want to do, and that's why I decide to stop with these 2 shops, Café de la Presse and Café de Sablon, and 1 Café Capital, because one of the 3 Café Capital was open only on Saturday and Sunday, and it was a roastery, and we need to have more place, and in fact there is no sense to open just the weekend this shop. Then I decide to move the place, and we have in fact 3 locations, but 1 is not open for the moment to the customer, just roastery and training center. But also less pressure, because we have a small team now, focus on what we want to do, accent on the brand, accent on the quality, less quantity to roast but better quality, important, have more time to pass with our B2B customer, to explain to our customer what they need to do to increase the quality, invite this customer to the roastery to see how their coffee are made, visiting, have a better network, because now we have time again to visit other coffee shop or origin countries, and visiting other cities. Then that's why I take the decision. And also a big part of the decision was the quantity of the invoice at the end of the month. When you have a lot of different locations, you have a lot of rent, a lot of salary, a lot of taxes, a lot of provider who want their money immediately, because when you have 5 shops, the amount of the invoice are very big. Then they have no patience, because they want their money super quick, because due to the size of the final amount, then everything was super pressure. Now I want to have less pressure and better focus on our brand, Café Capital.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing. It's something that I get really impressed about, but because there's very few people in the industry that would say no to money in that sense and actually back down to focus more on quality, and also focus more on, I mean, it's not just quality, it's also running it's a personal investment, right? Whereas as you as an individual, when you have a company, you need to be happy.
Yeah. And
it doesn't matter how much money you get unless you're in a happy, productive place.
And I'm a coffee nerd, and I want to try to have the best quality in the cup. But when you have 5 places like me and a team of, I think at the peak time we have 18 to 20 barista, but it's impossible to have 20 world champions. Then you have rookie, experimented barista, but you have no consistency in the cups. And what you need to do, in fact, it's like you divided your shop in 2 divisions. You put all the rookie in one shop, all the best barista in other shop, the shop that you want, that you have decided that it will be the main the main shop for Café Capital, then you put all the best barista there, the the rookie in other place, and you have no consistency, and every day you have you are angry because the quality of the coffee by a rookie barista is for sure not good enough for a coffee nerd like me. Then you are frustrated, and that's why also it was a decision to cut this problem and to have two shops with a small team of barista, but people who have a lot of patience for the coffee and who want to follow the project, and not people just they need a job and they think that barista is cool to do.
No, sure, and I think that's. I mean, it's with growth comes a lot of challenges, comes opportunities as well. But quite often, especially in the roastery world as well, if you look at, I mean, there's been a ton of research done on roasteries that are growing, and it's very clear that the bigger you are, the harder it is to make money, right? Because a lot of the times the increase in cost is too high and doesn't keep up with the increase in revenue from the sold coffee, for example. So it's the same with April, whereas we're at a point now where we're tiny. We don't own our own roastery. We have a pretty special setup, and that enables us to actually make money. But the second we move into a big production space and we grow and grow and grow, the challenge is that it's going to be much more difficult to make money, right? Plus, as you say as well, it's harder the bigger the company, especially. I have so much respect for anyone in coffee that has a roastery and a coffee shop. Part of why I only have a roastery and not a coffee shop is that I would never be able to pull it off. It would be too difficult. I don't imagine that I would be able to keep the quality that I want. So that's why I'm staying away from it, right? It was a very challenging thing. So it was actually very, because I didn't know about this. I learned about this only when I arrived first day, right? So it's a really, it's an interesting process, I think. And I think it's something that will, in the future, will make your business better as well, right? Because it's more concentrated.
You're right, because at the end, with 5 coffee shops, an administration team, a large production team, we lose money then. And now with two shops full of customer, one roastery, we earn money.
Yeah, for sure,
easily.
For sure. I mean, it's there's always we have been talking a lot about this, me and Francois, over the last days, where it's I mean, running a business is I mean, you have passion, and then you also have a bunch of numbers, right? And you need to get to a place where the numbers make sense, right? And I think a lot of people in coffee are very passion forward, for lack of a better term, where they're so passion forward that they forget to look at the numbers, right? Yeah. So they put themselves in these positions where, funnily enough, they're actually do less passion because they're just hunting the numbers, but they're hunting the wrong numbers, or they had the wrong costs, or they had the wrong profits, and they don't understand what's going on. So I think it's very important to some extent to never keep track of the numbers, right? You need to understand what's happening from a business perspective. Doesn't matter how passionate you are about coffee if you can't get the numbers right. So making sure your numbers are correct. I mean, am I selling for the right price? Is the cost of my boxes for shipping the right price, right? Whatever that might be, is enabling you to have more passion in your business.
But absolutely, and when you have a human size business, also you have enough time to understand the numbers, but also you have the possibility to work with a kind of provider that you want to select it exactly for the quality. When my business was bigger than now with 5 shops, finally, for example, for the milk, I have the opportunity to work with a farm for the milk, but this farm I have no possibility to have enough milk for my 5 coffee places, and we are open 7 on 7, and the guys is too small for that kind of quantity that I need. And it was the same with a bakery. I would like to work with a small bakery and an artisan, but the guys said me, yeah, I can do that kind of job. Is too big for me. Then finally, you you need to work with common provider that all the chain have. And where is your specificity? There is no specificity. Yeah, the only specificity was the beans, but for the rest, it was a random quality because
you lose the identity. Yeah. Sure.
You have no choice about the provider because you are too big.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really interesting perspective that a lot of people lose track on as well. There's two things I want us to go into before we wrap this up. And first of all, one, because you have a pretty interesting background before starting with coffee, and personally, I'm very interested in why and how people end up starting with coffee. So, how did you end up starting your first coffee shop? What was the what did you do before, and how and why did you change that to coffee?
I was in the music industry before. I was a DJ, and also I worked for a huge international company organized festival and concerts. And I work for the Belgium division. But at the end, all the company was transferred to the UK division, because the market in Belgium is small. Then all the administration was transferred to UK, and the decision was to close the general office in Belgium. That's why all the team was fired, and I start with a small sandwich bar, in fact, with coffee, and that's my first concept, Café de la Presse, sandwiches and coffees with a lot of toppings, and that's the first the first step in the restaurant business. And finally, we move into the specialty coffee, and we finally sold the Café de la Presse bar with the sandwiches and sofa and blah 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 to be focused on Café Capital. But before I was a DJ and concert, media manager for a concert and festival company, a huge festival company.
Oh, very cool. And I mean, that's something you can tell very clearly when you go into your shops as well. It's very music focused.
Yeah, in fact, a coffee bar, but I think it's general information for all the restaurants. You need to have your own personality, and especially in a coffee bar, because it's a street food coffee bar. In fact, a lot of people take away cups. Then it's a kind of street food. And then, who are your customer in the street food market? Generally, it's young people, trendy people, young worker, student, and then you need to have the same code that kind of customer. In fact, it's my own code also. Then I like the music, and then we play only vinyl and a selection of indie rock or specific electronic music or world music, Afrobeat and something like this. We have also our coffee bar is just our neighborhood. Our neighborhood is one of the main concert hall in Brussels that we try to follow their agenda, because in fact the team from Ancienne Belgique concert hall comes happen at the bar, then they said us, in the future this is the band who will play in the concert hall, and we try to play the music that the band will play the night during the concert, and often the band come into our bar because we are just close to the concert hall, and often the musician want to drink coffee or Red Bull. There is in fact two possibilities to be wake up during the night, and it's a mix of street and street life mode and music and coffees.
How difficult on the subject of identity and personality, which we talked a lot about as well, whereas I mean we need more coffee shops with a higher amount of integrity and personality, right? Which I think Café Capital is a great example of. But how difficult is it to implement the same level of integrity and personality in a coffee roastery? Do you find that a lot more challenging? Or do you find that to be easy or difficult? Or?
Yeah. In fact, in a roastery, the only thing that the customer will see is the packaging. Is your packaging is designed with the code that your customer knows or not? But it's a private space, generally, a roastery. Or you put a roastery into a coffee bar, and I think it's the best way to do, to have the roastery into your coffee bar.
To show more personality.
Yeah. But for the moment, for us, we are close to the customer, and the only thing that I can give to the customer is the design of the packaging, and is this packaging is in relationship with their code or not. But the coffee shop need to help the roastery in the brand. In fact, if your coffee shop is famous with all the code that your customer have, they want to buy your coffee because they follow your brand.
Sure, definitely. I think that's very important. I think that's something that I noticed with April as well, that it's very, very difficult to create a strong brand without a physical location, right? Yeah. Without a coffee shop or without a roastery people can actually come to. I think that's a very, very big challenge.
And also when for a coffee bar like me, where the music is very important, where we try to follow the code of our customer, it's important also when you're in the recruitment of the team to have a team with the same code.
For sure, and that's also very difficult.
Yeah, we had some barista with an excellent barista level, but I don't know why, but they go to the McDonald's foods every day, and they listen super commercial music, and they don't understand the underground code that we want to put on the table, and at the end it doesn't work.
No, I totally agree with that. We're gonna do, before we wrap up, I want to hear some kind of final thoughts on where do you want Café Capital to be in the future? What's your goal? Where do you want the coffee industry to be as well? Like, what do you think will be the new trend?
The market for the small roastery is to be into the home of citizen. Then which kind of machine they have at home, and then if you decide to be at home you need to produce capsule or grinded coffee, because generally they have no grinder and no espresso machine. And, would you like to be there or not? Would you like to be only in restaurant? Okay, then if you do this, you need to give a minimum of workshop to your customer, because if not, they will call you in 2 weeks that the quality of the coffee is bad and you are a bad roaster, and it's very you will be angry with your own customer. But I think the future of the coffee, my future is probably to open perhaps new bars in the future. But if I do this, I need someone who will organize the administration, and I need to have my time to improve to follow the quality and to follow my own job. Yeah. I don't want to fall down in the past into the daily problems. But the future of the industry is probably the presence of specialty coffee roaster into supermarkets with capsule or grinded coffee. I think the same like commodity coffee, but with better image and better design and better quality of coffee.
Yeah, to raise the low level of the coffee, really, right? Yeah. Around the world.
And the first entrance will be all the new kind of bio supermarket with or local provider supermarket.
Yeah, super. I think it's for me it's really interesting. It's always interesting to get around in different countries and different cities to see, and Belgium is a pretty different market from what I'm used to in Scandinavia as well. But it's going to be very interesting to see what's coming up next for Café Capital. I'm looking forward to see what's going to happen. And thank you for taking the time as well to sit down.
Pleasure.
It's been really
always
interesting.
A pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. And then we'll make sure to do all the links for Café Capital so you guys can try the coffee, buy the coffee as well when we release this. As always, thank you guys for tuning in and listening. From us here at April, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share with your friends, family, and colleagues. Thank you.